there's another element that there was millions of new people that re-entered the political process, and then there was a ton of people that re-entered after kind of checking out for a while due to cynicism, apathy, whatever, and rightful apathy.
And COVID.
So, right. So between 2015, 2016, the Bernie wave, millions of people now for 7 years, if this was their first foray into politics, they've been told, you know, the sky is going to fall if you don't hold your nose and vote for either Hillary or Biden. They've been told that, you know, it's going to get much, much worse if we have Republicans in office. And on the state level, that's obviously being shown in many ways. I think what DeSantis is doing in Florida, Governor Abbott in Texas, Lewis just had a report how he's basically trying to pass a law to, you know, get rid of water breaks for construction workers, not to mention the attacks on transgender people, et cetera, et cetera. So on a state level,
houses and some of these governorships, the Democratic Party hasn't even tried to mount a challenge. And it's something in the red states, the average is about 75 to 80% of local seats in those red states are completely unchallenged.
Right.
So the Democratic Party is just like completely abandoned a bunch of these places. So folks don't even have a choice there. But then on the national level, they're going to use these places as the boogeyman in order to say you have to vote for Biden because look at what's happening in Florida, even though we basically abandoned it. You know, right. So it almost benefits them that there's so much insane fascism happening from the right.
But I think at the end of the day, for all these new people that got into politics and a lot of older people that re-entered because of the Bernie wave, they've kind of seen both sides. They've seen a Trump presidency and what they were told was going to be much, much worse if we allow it, and a Biden presidency. Are there some things that are clearly different for the worse under a Republican? Yeah, I'm not going to lie. But there's also a lot of things that we were told would be better under a Democrat that are actually worse. So the bottom line is you can't keep using that scare tactic of, you know, fascism. It's going to get a lot worse, particularly for vulnerable people, if you don't vote for Biden or you don't, you know, or stop screwing around with this risky business, because for most people, it's been the same under both economically, if not worse. So to me, that's the difference. You have all these new people that got in there and they're not as naive or impressionable because they've seen the fascist president in Trump. They've seen the supposedly kinder, softer president in Biden. And at the end of the day, it's all the same shit on what matters, which is food on the table, gas in the car, you know, can I support my children? And it's not much different. Obviously, you had COVID, which threw a monkey wrench, but for the key years that you're going to look at, which is the first years of the Trump presidency versus Biden, yes, Biden had COVID longer than Trump had to deal with it. But economically, what's really the difference? The main difference, Biden didn't do a massive tax cut that benefited wealthy people, but he's done a lot of other shit that has benefited wealthy people, including not going after capital gains taxes, not trying for a wealth tax. I mean, he's told wealthy people your standard of living, nothing's going to change. And he's kept that promise.
Millions and millions and, well, what is it? Is it 4.6 billion total? I believe when you wartime spending and to the military industrial complex, he's the most any president has ever spent. And that is including adjusting for inflation. That on top of suggesting that states who didn't spend, instead of requiring them to spend COVID money on the COVID relief money that they were granted on public works programs and social services, he suggested that they spend it on militarizing their police, which they've done, which of course benefits corporations. So there are a lot of things that he has done in other ways to benefit companies other than a tax cut. And if you actually take a step aside, take away the rhetoric and the crazy tweeting from Donald Trump every day, and you look at the immigration policies, you look at the censorship policies, like those that, you know, we were talking about, the domestic terrorism policies that they're now using in Cop City to arrest people and charge them. That's Biden administration policies. You look at how much is being spent on the military industrial complex. When you start looking at the actual policy, yes, the rhetoric was different with Donald Trump, and there was some dangers in that rhetoric for sure. But if you look at the actual policies, Biden is way worse. So when folks want to go and voter shame because they say, you know, don't vote for a third party candidate because you're going to get Trump, and you're actually looking at the policies, and I'm kind of like, yeah, take away the mean tweets and take away working directly with the Nazis and instead working covert with the Nazis, and you get Biden.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I also don't want, let's call a spade a spade. Trump is plenty horrible too. There's a lot of terrible things his administration did. But on economic matters, on the military industrial complex, I think Trump he could say whatever he wants. I think he'd be basically doing the same thing on Ukraine, because it's not really the presidents that drive foreign policy. It's the CIA and the military industrial complex. Don't forget, a lot of people fail to say it, Trump actually armed Ukraine and gave them weapons while he was president. That is never mentioned. Obama, I don't credit him much, but Obama didn't do that. But at the end of the day, on the economic Hunger Games that we live in the new Gilded Age we live in, it's really all the same shit. The only difference really being one party is just overt. We're going to give free money to rich people. That's the Republicans with their tax cuts, deregulation. And the other party kind of sprinkles some crumbs for the proletariat while never actually trying to take from the top. That's really the only difference. But it's all basically screwing you either directly or just screwing you by keeping the status quo. I will say, I think it's a good thing Cornel West is running third party. I don't want DeSantis as president. I would fight him on day one, but I also don't think we could continue this cycle for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Well, hold your nose because we can't have worse. Well, then you're never going to get better. And I think
if we don't actually take a step and take a chance, nothing is going to change. Now with Cornel West, I think what it comes down to is being able to mount a strong campaign, bring people on that know what they're doing, build up your staff, you know, organize on the ground, reach people. You got to be on social media, but you also have to be on the ground building up in the states. If they can build a strong campaign, I believe that, you know, he could potentially do very well. But it's about really building that campaign. And sometimes with independent candidates, it's where you run into that's really where the rubber meets the road, and sometimes why they don't do as well. But this is a very unique opportunity I don't think it's going to be unique in the future. Just this is the first presidential election that we've seen where Gen Z are going to be voting, and their voting is outpacing boomers. So the amount of Gen Z that could possibly vote is the same percentage as boomers that can possibly vote. That has not been the case for generations now. You know, the boomers have been the largest voting bloc, far outpacing millennials, Gen X, other generations. So now we're seeing a bit of a generational shift. Not that, you know, I'm sure there's plenty of, not to judge or say how boomers would vote one way or another, just to say that the voter pool is diversifying and it's expanding. And so anything is possible, because this will be the first election besides the midterms that we're really going to see this massive voter bloc who is engaged politically, making their voices heard. So an independent candidate could get a good chunk depending on their outreach.
And also, this is a topic for another day, and we should look into it more. But it doesn't get discussed much. One of the fastest growing voter suppression tactics is college campuses. If you look at what happened in Texas during the Democratic primary between Biden and Bernie, I mean, Bernie it was kind of surprising he was even competing in Texas. But Texas colleges have more people than a lot of cities have. And people were waiting online 9 hours, 10 hours. That's intentional. And that's been happening all over the country and college campuses, which at this point is Gen Z. And it's by design. They are trying to suppress college vote. They are not allowing people, if you have a student ID to vote, you need three different forms of ID, this and that. So there is obviously black voters is voter suppression tactics, purging black voters off the rolls. That's not going anywhere. But there has been increased appetite, particularly among Republicans, to suppress the vote of younger people, Gen Z, millennials, knowing that exactly what she's saying, not that they will exercise their right to vote at the same proportion as baby boomers, but the sheer numbers, there are that many now eligible to vote, equal, if not greater than the baby boomers. But listen, at the end of the day, if your standard of living has not materially gotten better or worse in the last under Trump or Biden, you know, unless you are somebody that feels, rightly so, a greater threat, whether it's an LGBT person, trans person, et cetera, because of the Republican proposals, policies, hate, I totally understand people holding their nose. But if you have, 3 kids and you're barely making it, you can only focus on what you could focus on, and you're not going to be so driven to vote for Biden because of the bipartisan infrastructure deal that does not materially affect your life, or tax incentives for green energy, which would have been nice 15 years ago, or, name your neoliberal crumb cake. It's just not going to do it. That doesn't mean you don't care about vulnerable people, but we're all vulnerable in this predicament, which is the economic Hunger Games. And I just think the key term will be organized. Third parties, we know about MPP. We know the Green Party has had a lot of organizing problems, but they did get Jill Stein on 48 ballots. She was eligible in, I believe, 45 or 48, I forget, ballots in 2016. So if Cornel West can get on over 40 states ballots, I don't even think he needs to be on a debate stage because, him going on Joe Rogan, him doing the media circuit, rallies, this and that. The man is inspirational. I remember watching him in New Hampshire the night before the New Hampshire primary in 2020. I mean, he's got a lot of that Nina Turner, Obama, even though he's full of it, and then some. There's just something about him, and people need to be inspired right now. So we'll see. I'm not going to lie and say he could win. I don't know. I mean, crazier things have happened, but he could certainly.
It's hard to know. There's a lot of unregistered, so only a small percentage of the country votes anyway for the presidency. Right. Only a fraction. So there's a lot of. One question I have is a Trump-Biden presidency going to cause so much apathy, which I wouldn't blame people for, because I feel like I want to dig back into my community organizing and local organizing and not really focus on the presidency. So how many people are feeling that? And will there be a level of apathy? So will voter turnout be as high as it was when Bernie was engaging people, which it spiked up? Or when, way back in 2008, when Obama first ran, we kind of had seen dips. So I feel like a Trump-Biden show, presidency might drum up a lot of apathy. I'm not saying it would, but that's one concern that I have, that, less people are going to show up to vote. And then who might be more likely to show up to vote are the people who are diehard in one party faction or another. So
I'll say right now, it's not directly linked, but I do think Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. are making a major mistake. I think they should have, maybe they have been, they should have been on the phones yesterday and been announcing 3 debates between each other. I'm sure, he's not my favorite person, but I'm sure Rogan would do one. Whether it be Rogan or some other high profile independent media, because I think it would be highly viewed. I think it would show just at least articulation wise, a very, very sharp contrast to Biden. And I think it would shame Biden and the Democratic Party. Maybe not just the first one, but if you have 2 or 3, I think it would really put the pressure on the Democrats to hold at least one debate with Biden, because it would get to a point where Democrats are going to say, it might not be Cornel West. It might be us canceling the primary that fucks us, because enough voters are going to say, yeah, I'm not voting for you because you guys just got rid of democracy on our side. Yeah. Even if they are scared of Trump or DeSantis, you might repeal enough voters that are saying, no, like you didn't even subtly rig it. You just canceled it. So I think they should be doing that. And that brings me to, listen, Ross Perot got on a debate stage with Bill Clinton and the first President Bush. If somehow Cornel West or whomever the third party candidate managed to get on a debate stage in September or October against Biden and Trump or Biden and DeSantis, I would say, who the fuck knows? Because I think the contrast would be very stark. And I think he could really shame and embarrass and go at both of them in a way that Bernie was just not willing to. So we'll see. I mean, I think that's a pipe dream at this point. But hey, if somebody is polling at 4 to 6% without even officially being a nominee for any third party, without rallying or doing anything, that's pretty impressive, I think.